Appreciate you coming. I'm Chris Hinch. I am the Microsoft Practice Director at A&M. I've been in the IT space for 25 plus years. Been doing 365 since it came out. I did my very first Office migration from Exchange Online to 365, and I kind of just was hooked, and I kind of stayed into the cloud game since then. But before that, I was doing plenty of on-prem work. But been many roles. I've been CTOs of organizations. I've been chief architects on Microsoft practices, and like I said, now I'm the Microsoft Practice Director at A&M. And today I'm going to be presenting with Scott. So Scott, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey, Scott Rendell. Ooh, loud. Turn it down. I'll whisper. I'm Scott Rendell from Microsoft. That's better, thanks. Partner Solution Architect, and many of you seen me, met me before, so I just work with partners on in the modern workspace. So happy to be here and presenting with Chris today. So this is great. Thank you.
Yep. So we're going to present on what's new with AI and Teams. Everybody's going to think, oh, great, another Copilot session. No, there's other things besides Copilot, I promise you. Copilot is the cool stuff, the gen stuff, but we have some other things today. So we are going to talk about Teams Premium and how it differs from Copilot, and a lot of the new features that have come out this year. There was a lot of announcements at Enterprise Connect, and we're going to go over a few of those. We're going to talk about how Copilot on phones actually is working now with PSTN.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. Some of the intelligent stuff that's happening inside meetings as well. And they announced one of the things I was going to talk about at Copilot for meetings yesterday during the keynote, so you might hear a little repeat from the keynote from yesterday as well. So Teams Premium. Does anybody show of hands, you know what Teams Premium is?
How many of you think it's just meeting recap? Nobody? Oh, good. So you are informed. Oh, that's good.
So Teams Premium is a lot of the advanced features. There is some AI that's built into it, intelligent recap like he's talking about, but that's more what they refer to as reactive AI. It's kind of like, this has happened, I want to turn a crank, and I want to get the results out of that. It's not generative. You don't really interact with it as much. But then Copilot is that generative AI tool that is out there. So it's very conversational. In Kevin's session yesterday, he was talking about it's natural language. So you can have a conversation with it like it's inside Teams, inside of a chatbot itself. So that's the difference. Teams Premium and Copilot do overlap with Intelligent Recap. So if you have Copilot, you can get Intelligent Recap. But if you don't have Copilot, you can still get it with Teams Premium. You think you want to add on to that?
So yeah, and many of you probably already know this. If you have translation turned on, then obviously you can go back after the fact and ask Copilot about the meeting. But there's that little switch in the meeting options that you can actually not go back after the meeting. So if your company has a compliancy that we're not keeping transcription, we're not recording it, you can use Copilot during the meeting with this switch turned on. I believe it's called, well, I don't know what it's called anymore, but you won't be able to, what's that? Anyway, before and after meeting.
Yeah,
right?
there's a screenshot on it later.
Yeah, so you'll be able to use Copilot during the meeting, but it only keeps the transcription in cache memory and then wipes it as soon as the meeting's over, so you have no access to it after the fact. So there's a little switch in the meeting options. Just be aware of which one you're using. Otherwise, you can have it or not.
So when you get into Copilot, and I really promise you, it's not all about Copilot. When you get into Copilot, the first part of it, you can see it was for VoIP calls, so that was inside Teams. That's been there for a while, but they released, I think it was late last year, it's now available for PSTN calls, which means if I call Scott on Scott's cell phone from my Teams client, I can now get Copilot to actually summarize our conversation. Or if I have a sales call and I need to communicate with a client and they're not on Teams, maybe they're on another platform that begins with Z or W, so some other type of platform, and they're not inside Teams, and I need to be able to communicate with them, I can now use Copilot because it's a PSTN connection.
And what's awesome about that is, you don't have to worry about taking notes. So if you're driving in your car or you're in a remote location or you just don't have access to a pen, you can always just go back and say, now what did we talk about during this call? Especially for those of you that get a lot of calls, trying to keep sales calls, separate and trying to figure out who I was talking to, what about. Right? As we all get older, it gets that way. At least maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Well, and on that point, so I'll call Scott and we'll just get off on tangents. And so we'll be talking about, hey, what did you do this weekend? And then it kind of comes back into something that we want to talk about. And I've forgot to take notes because we were just having a general conversation. Same thing with Kevin. I mean, Kevin and I have sessions the same way where it's like, oh, I wish I would have recorded that because I need the dialogue that we had. But now with Copilot for PSTN calls, and that's what I really wanted to call out on this one, is that's the newer feature that has come out that a lot of people aren't aware of. And I did have a video. Hopefully you guys will be able to hear it. There's a little bit of audios in here, but I got a video that I wanted to show you that kind of demonstrates over VoIP and PSTN.
With Copilot and Teams Phone, you can make and receive calls from your Teams app on any device and get real-time summarization and insight. Here, you're on a call with a teammate discussing the plans for an upcoming marketing event. During the call, Copilot can summarize key action items, owners, and deadlines discussed, so you don't have to worry about getting distracted by taking notes. Or you can use natural language commands, such as asking Copilot for suggestions on additional planning work streams you and your teammates should consider for the event you're planning. Copilot also works during PSTN calls. Here, you're on a PSTN call with a customer who is interested in learning more about your company's recent product announcements. With the help of Copilot, you can summarize the call, helping you stay focused and engaged during the conversation. Copilot can also curate a list of unresolved questions that came up during the call. The customer has some specific questions that require input from another subject matter expert in your organization. Using the Consult Then Transfer feature, you can chat with your colleague and confirm she's able to help the customer with their questions. Now, when you transfer the call to her, thanks to Copilot, she's able to get a summarized recap of your discussion and a list of the top questions raised by the customer, all in a matter of seconds. This saves you time you would have spent catching up and creates a better customer experience since the customer won't need to recap their questions. These scenarios are only a few examples of the many ways you can use Copilot during Teams calls, helping you spend less time on busy work and more time on connecting and collaborating with teammates, customers, and partners.
So that part, the last part about the unresolved questions. I know like if say I needed to transfer to another person in the organization, being able to have Copilot say, hey, what did we not get answered on this call? And it can easily go into that transcript and then just transfer that whole kind of, here's the unresolved questions to somebody else, and it's not a Teams to Teams call. That's pretty powerful in my opinion. I don't know about you, but that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's something we've all done at some point, right? You say, well, you know, I'm not the person you need to talk to. Let me just transfer this over. And then there's that 30 or 45 seconds. Well, what's this call about? You know, give me the synopsis. Why am I talking to this person? This kind of thing. Well, as you saw with Copilot, listen, it's all right there in Copilot. Go ahead and ask any questions. Let me just get this call over to you so we're not wasting anybody's time.
And it kind of goes back to the true warm transfer. So the person on the other end doesn't have to repeat themselves anymore because you can say what we've talked about so far, what are unresolved in that example, and you can just continue the conversation. It's a better experience for the person on the other end, not alone just yourself because it's an easier transfer, but it's just an all-around better experience. So we were talking, that was Copilot for PSTN, and you're like, well, I've got Teams Premium. I don't have Copilot yet. Well, cool thing is it's available on Intelligent Recap if you have Teams Premium. As long as you have the transcription turned on when you're on this PSTN call, as long as you have transcription, then Teams Premium will allow you to do Intelligent Recap. So once again, you're still getting that cool, that powerful sense of you don't have to take notes as much anymore over a PSTN type call. And if you needed to transfer this to somebody else inside your organization, you can grab the recap and easily ship that out to whoever you need to transfer it to, again, making that better experience for the other. Yeah?
Do both people that are in the call have to have the Teams Premium license for that recap to happen, or just one person?
The only person that's going to get the Intelligent Recap is the person that has the license.
Now, if they both do, right, and they're recording it on both ends, then
Yep.
then they would both have it from their end. Yes.
Do you have to manually turn on that recording feature each time?
Has to be transcribed, yes. You don't have to be recording, you have to transcribe.
But
And
there are policies that you can do auto for all calls.
Yeah.
If your organization allows it, yeah, by
Does
policy.
it play an announcement that the call's being recorded?
If you turn it on during, like say I call you and you're on a phone call, yes, you'll hear that little dog, but if you have the policy that Scott's talking about, I don't think that
It's
it'll
a
be
beep.
announced. It's a beep or something, but it's not announced this phone is being recorded. Transcription too, like I said, that's the important. When you record, you automatically get transcription, but you have to have transcription for Intelligent Recap. For Copilot, and we'll go over it in a little bit, you don't, quote unquote, have to have it. It is recommended. There are some features that you can use Copilot without transcription now, though. So how many people use Teams on their phones? Cool thing. Teams Premium, if you have it, Intelligent Recap's now on your mobile as well. So I thought that was pretty cool. That was announced at Enterprise Connect. It was in the little kind of footer that came out of the big announcement. That it wasn't in the keynote, it wasn't anything, it was just on the, hey, here's what we announced at Enterprise Connect. And that was pretty cool that it's now available on the mobile as well.
And that's going to be really interesting when you start talking about Teams Phone Mobile and the interaction between whether that call is native in Teams or whether that call is native on cellular, and the ability to go back and forth. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out once Teams Phone Mobile starts to gain more traction, yes.
In that scenario that you're showing a screen where a user's using Teams on their mobile phone, they call somebody else on Teams, and the call completes, and you get that transcription, where does that transcription show up after the call hangs up? Is it in the chat history?
Yes. So anytime you make a call inside Teams, if you're on your desktop or on your phone, you'll see how it kind of creates a chat. No matter what, it'll be stored in there. In Intelligent Recap, because transcription has to be on, you'll still have that kind of history if you need to go back to it on your computer. But if you don't have transcription turned on and you're using Copilot, once the meeting's over, it's gone. So transcription is going to be key if you need to keep anything for later.
Is it automatically turned on? So on the mobile phone?
No, you have to enable it. You have to turn it on.
So where can I find it? So when you have the dial pad and there's also a button transcription on, or?
It's in the notes where it says, like you're on the call right here and it's in the notes when the call's over.
He's asking how to enable it on mobile. Is it automatic if it's in your
So once
client?
transcription is turned on, you don't get Intelligent Recap until the call's over. So it's always going to be, Intelligent Recap's always going to be post-call. It's not going to be during call. Copilot is during call. Intelligent Recap is, think about, it's like, this has already happened and now I want to turn a crank and I want to figure out what happened. So that Intelligent Recap is truly that. It's a recap of what just happened.
Is transcription handled differently if it's a meeting set up in a channel versus just a standard meeting outside the channel, as far as where you find it and where it's stored and things like that?
It's always going to be stored inside the meeting that's happened. So if it's like it's a meeting that you started inside the Teams client, then you're going to have that chat that's open. And if you do a meeting inside of a channel, then if you go inside that channel and you see the recording, you have to click into that meeting to get to it.
Yeah, so it's either going to be in the chat, the individual chat, or multi-party chat, or in the channel where the meeting occurred.
Wherever the meeting
so, yeah,
was.
So I think the answer to your question is yes, it'll be in both. It'll be in either place, wherever the meeting was held, or wherever the call was held. Wait, one moment. Does that answer your question? And we forgot to repeat the question. So,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Because it's stored like in the chat, you have to scroll and kind of find it. Are there any plans or anything for like a central repository to kind of find, find a specific meeting or something like that?
All right, so the question was, I think it was, because the transcription is going to be kind of buried into the chat, is there any roadmap or any features that they can access it later? Is that, yeah, that's, okay, so that is question. I have not seen that on the roadmap. I'm not saying that it's not there. It is not publicly on the roadmap that I've seen, and I did check the roadmap this morning. It's not there yet. And when you start talking about transcriptions and keeping them to, you also have to be concerned about your compliance on how long you're allowed to keep those. So your compliance rules are also going to override that. So say if your compliance rules is I can only save it for a week, right, 7 days, then that will be gone after a week.
So are you asking how do you find like particular information in a transcription? Is that in Teams or?
No, just if there's maybe a repository in the future where it's hey, here's the list of class, you can filter to maybe find a specific meeting or something like that, or a specific chat.
Yeah, that's actually going to be part of your retention policy. So
Yep.
yeah.
Well, they're also stored in like OneDrive or in SharePoint, right? So you can go to your SharePoint.
Depending again.
Depending if it's in a channel or not in a channel, right?
Yeah, based on the retention policy. Yep. Sorry, another question here.
Yeah, so specific to the PSTN calls, once you record one, it shows an icon that says Copilot recorded it within the call log.
Yes.
But as you receive more calls and that disappears, is there a place to go find that, I guess, is the follow-up question to that.
So the question is, as your window fills up with calls in your history, right, and one maybe drops off, right, is there a way to go back? I believe you can just scroll. I've not actually tested that, but I believe it's just a scroll. And based on your retention policy, so you got so many lines, based on your display, and then you should be able to scroll back through that. Because to my knowledge, the history is based on the retention for the
Correct.
history behind that. So again, back to retention. Other questions? Okay. Next.
So they announced at Enterprise Connect voice isolation. They actually demoed this at the keynote I wasn't at Enterprise Connect, but I did go back and watch the keynote. And it was pretty slick. This video came out afterwards, and I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that this is actually a feature that's out there now, and it's pretty powerful as well.
Today, work can happen anywhere. Microsoft Teams empowers you to stay connected wherever you are.
Oh, sorry.
So we need to get ready for this product launch. There are several milestones that we need to hit.
Thanks everyone for your reading to at the airport.
Thank you so much for putting in the Microsoft Teams voice isolation distinguishes your voice from others, so you're heard clearly in calls and meetings.
I was just asking you how your weekend was.
They're aware of the delivery timeline, so that they agree to deliver on time.
We are looking forward to this partnership. It will be amazing for us in the company.
They're looking really great. I'm looking forward to sharing this with our leaders. Be heard anywhere with voice isolation in Microsoft Teams.
So the cool thing about this, so there's a lot of the providers that are on the expo floor that they have the earbuds or the headsets that have a lot of AI technology built into the boom itself, and they do a good job, but it's not isolating your voice. It's trying to take out a lot of the spatial audio that's around you. What this is actually doing is because you're considered the speaker, and especially if you have your voice onboarded into your tenant, it can really hone in on your own voice signals, and it's going to cut out everything except for your voice signals in the platform itself instead of at the actual hardware layer. Yeah.
Is that feature in any way tied to the Teams premium licensing?
So the question was, is voice isolation tied to Teams Premium? To my knowledge, it is not. It's just a feature in Teams that's going to be rolling out.
Do you have to register your voice for this to work, or will it work if you haven't registered?
Okay, the question was, do you have to register your voice? No, you don't have to. You get a better experience if you do, though.
Yes, in the back.
With voice isolation turned on, is that going to add a bigger payload to that data stream?
So the question was, with voice isolation turned on, is it going to add a bigger payload to the stream? That's a fantastic question, actually.
I wouldn't think so, only because voice isolation is done at the client level on your device. So I can understand why you would ask that. But I believe the AI, the new AI, like in Teams 2, is more lightweight. But that's definitely something we can follow up on.
It seems like it'd be less because voice activity detection on other platforms actually reduces the amount of RTP traffic that's sent and appears as silence. So it seems like this would work similar in that format.
Yeah, it's usually done on the client side, it's only passing whatever it's doing, so it's not getting that outside noise.
Yeah, I haven't seen how the signals are coming in. I haven't been able to test this personally yet, so I can't answer it directly, but as soon as it's available in my tenant, I will test that because it's a great question. But I would agree with, you were saying that how it's kind of breaking it down at the client side. So it's not being, it's still being passed from your headset or whatever you're using to Teams, and then Teams is doing it at that point.
So RTP streams shouldn't be changed because it's not passing all that audio to Teams for process and isolate your voices on the client side.
Right, because
Technically, it should be just your voice.
right, because if it's a peer-to-peer call, none of that's going up to the cloud anyway. Question?
I was going to say, have you tested the difference between voice isolation and the background noise only? In playing around with it, I got the similar results. So it's like the background, like a light version of it. Is there any documentation available yet?
I have not personally tested it. Oh, he was asking, have we, can you, I want to make sure.
So you saw the demo. You
Yep.
see the option. You can actually toggle between
Yes.
voice isolation and background noise
Yep.
only. In my experience, even with music or people speaking, I've worked just as well. Just wondering what
Okay.
the actual difference is between.
So the question was for the people when they watch this later is there a big difference in the video it showed you can do background noise only or you can do voice isolation? And the question was, have we seen a big difference in between the two? Once again, it's not turned on in my tenant, so I have not been able to test this personally. I don't know if it's turned on in yours yet.
Yeah, it is. So it really predicates to whether or not you've trained the client. Okay, so they're probably, to our ear, they're probably very similar. But from an AI standpoint, if you've trained it, it knows your voice pattern. So it's, so things that are close to your voice, right, relative or something, I don't know, might filter through if you're only taking out background noise versus actually doing voice isolation. But yeah, so the key to this really is making sure you get in there and train your voice. And we get a lot of questions about, well, what happens if I leave the company? right? My voice is now recorded and all that. And all that stuff all goes away.
Yep.
It's tied to your client, so once your client and your identity is deprecated, all that kind of stuff goes away, because we get a lot of questions about, well, they've got my voice now. Well, no, they really don't.
Yeah.
So.
And another feature that I didn't put in here, and we're going to talk about intelligent speaker here in just a second. It's only going to work in the tenant that your voice is onboarded for. So like how I'm a guest in the Microsoft tenant, I would have to be Microsoft would have to turn me on to onboard my voice in order for those features to work if I'm using my guest Microsoft account in their tenant. But if I'm in the A&M tenant and my voice is onboarded, then it's going to work for me, but it won't work for Scott because he's not onboarded into my tenant.
Now, what will work? Here, hold on. What will work is it will identify the fact that there's a different speaker.
Yep.
It may not know me particularly, but it knows that I don't recognize this voice, but this is a unique voice that we can at least say speaker 2, 3, 4, what have you.
I didn't want to go off track with your topic, your content, your slides. I just want to ask the question, are you guys going to be covering how to onboard the voice, what that looks like in terms of training teams to know what your voice sounds like?
So the question was, are we going to go over how to onboard your voice in Teams? That's not in this presentation. This is more just informational type stuff. I can send you links on how to do it. It's not that hard.
It really isn't. If you go into settings and under devices, you'll see it. It's in there. Train your voice. Because we can do training of the voice to get your voice pattern and your facial recognition pattern as well.
Yeah, when you onboard your voice, I think you go through like 10 phrases that it makes you say, so we can get the highs and the lows of your voice. So it's really easy, and it's not a very time-consuming thing to onboard.
Just don't sing. It's not a good one. Yeah, it's not good.
So since we're talking about onboarding, we're talking about intelligent speaker. So this has been out for a little while, and it was always hardware dependent, and it was absolutely 100%. It had to be MTR on Windows. So those were two things. You only had Jabra Panicast, the Lenovo Think Smart Bar 50, the EPOS Expanded Capture, Yealink Smart Vision, and the Yealink MS Speech. Oh, and a Sennheiser, the Team Connect was. So those were the only devices that this was even available for. They announced at Enterprise Connect that it's coming very, very soon to any MTR on Windows, because they're now going to do it instead of at the hardware layer, they're going to do it at the tenant layer. So intelligent speaker, and we'll dive into what that is in just a second, will be available on MTRs for Windows. And they also announced that it's on the roadmap for Android MTRs. They don't have a date for it, but it is on the roadmap. So intelligent speaker is going to be coming across the board. I would say probably by the end of next fiscal. That's just a guess, so don't hold me to that. It's just my personal guess. But what intelligent speaker is. So you can see that there's people in a conference room, and then you have people that are on the remote side of the meeting too. And traditionally, when you transcribe a meeting, if you don't have intelligent speaker, in the transcription and even in Copilot, when it tries to do it, it's going to say, conference room B said this. And say, Scott and I are in conference room B, and Kevin, I'm going to pick on you again. Kevin's on the remote side. Anytime Kevin speaks, the transcription is going to know it's Kevin because he's logged into his Teams client. But Scott and I are just in here, so it's going to say speaker 1 in conference room B or speaker 2 in conference room B. It's not going to know that Scott assigned Kevin something or I assigned Kevin something. With intelligent speaker, after you onboard your voice, the MTR will actually know that Scott in conference room B said that, or Chris in conference room B said that. And that's what it's getting over here in the transcription. You can see it's got the name, and then in parentheses it has the conference room. So it indicates that that user was actually in the conference room.
Again, this is for meetings held within your tenant.
Yep.
So in this scenario, Chris and I are part of the same tenant. We're in an MTR room in one of our offices, or hosted by an MTR from our tenant.
Yeah, and the voice has to be onboarded. So the question earlier, did you have to? That is a requirement. The voice has to be onboarded. And if use the example you just did, but Scott's not onboarded in my tenant and he's a guest in here, I can technically go back in and say speaker 1 was Scott. Now the transcription's not going to update, but I can go back and I can tag everything in speaker 1 that was Scott. So you can do that after the fact as well.
Yes, sir.
If you have your voice and face onboarded, and you're in a meeting room, after, like you said, it recognizes who you are, will I get that information back into my tenant? So if I open up Teams, will I be able to see something like what I talked about in that meeting because it knows who I am? Will it send that over to me?
So the question was, he walked into a meeting inside an MTR room. and his voice is onboarded into the tenant, and he is speaking, is he going to be able to later open up Teams in his own tenant, because this is where everything was, and know that he was in there and get the transcription and get everything? Is that correct? Yeah. Very good question. I don't think it's going to tag you unless you joined the meeting with your ID. Like you bring your laptop in there and you did like a proximity join. So it's not going to know that you're in the meeting. It's just going to identify your voice profile.
But it did know I was in the meeting, right, because of my voice being on.
Yeah, I have not tested. That's a fantastic question again, and I have not tested that. It's another thing I'm going to test. My lab's going to be busy when I get home, so thank you.
So
yes.
the meeting's in your tenant, and you
Yeah,
walk
so
in.
if I'm in a meeting room,
Right.
right, and it knows, like you're saying, it knows that I was speaking in that room, right? So I would think, it would be nice if I open up, my Teams client, right, that I should be able to see that I was in that meeting and see the things I talked about in that meeting.
Yes.
It knows who I am.
Yes.
Oh, you're saying it will do that?
Yeah, it should do that. Yeah.
Okay. I have not tested
because
that.
Yeah, because it's all identity based.
Okay.
And
I'll test it this week, I can tell you
well,
that.
the other thing interesting about that is when you join that meeting with your device in a room, the first thing it's going to ask you is, do you want to join without audio on your
Well,
client, because you don't want the squeal and all
I don't
that
think
stuff.
he's joining with his, I think he just walked into the room.
No, I'm just walking in.
Oh,
and
I'm sorry.
Room, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in that meeting, and
Oh.
you're saying that it knows because my voice
It will,
is
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it will.
Okay.
Yep, that's the whole idea behind it. That's why, that's what this is all about. So.
Okay.
Do you know if this is going to work with BYOD meeting rooms?
So the question is this going to work with BYOD meeting rooms? The only thing that they've announced is MTROW and MTR on Android. That's the only thing that's been announced. Take it to the next level about people recognition. So you can actually, and I'm sorry that this is the only picture that I could find, and when I blew it up, it became really grainy, so I apologize. Same idea with Intelligent Speaker. Now it's doing the kind of profile of your face. So again, you have to onboard your profile and your face into your tenant. But now, instead of saying, like on the last slide, it just showed this with the conference room. Now it can actually zoom in, and it can see that it's the actual person's name. Like it sees that it's Joshua because of his facial profile that was already in there. So now on the right-hand side, when you look at the participants, it's actually saying who is in the conference room. And so if you're on the remote side of this, and it's people you've never met in the company, or maybe they have it and you're like a guest coming into that, you can actually see who the people are.
So I'm guessing that feature you're showing there is likely limited to the rooms, how many cameras are embedded in the room system, right, in order to do that?
It's intelligent framing.
It's intelligent framing, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
One camera does all that?
Yep. Well, it's the AI that's doing it, right? So the picture on the bottom in the yellow is what the camera sees.
Yep.
Okay. AI is now framing the individuals. Like for example, the guy in the blue shirt. If for somehow he moves,
and
3
there.
inches to the left, right? Then the camera's not going to be able to see, I guess, whoever's behind him. Framing depends on it's the face. So it'll try and frame the face and the person. But obviously, if somebody moves in front of them, that's going to be a bit of an issue.
Is there a limitation on how many people the room can be for it to do that? What's the maximum number of people that can break out like that?
The question was, what's the maximum number of people can be in an intelligent frame? I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I've seen up to 6, but I don't know if that's the limit. That's how many I've seen, but that doesn't mean,
It's 10?
Kevin
Okay.
says 10, so.
If Kevin
you,
said
Kevin.
it's got to be true.
Yeah. So a feature, sorry, question.
This is not a premium license or Copilot, this is just standard?
Yeah, this is part you have to onboard. It's one of those things, again, that you have to onboard it, though.
But yeah, it has to be hardware supported. There are still some of the older MTRs that don't support auto framing.
So another thing that was announced at Enterprise Connect, and Scott kind of alluded to in his example, say the person in the dark blue shirt, that he's in the back of the conference room, you can see there, he kind of leans back out of view, but they don't have their laptops, it looks like, in the meeting. Let's pretend that they do have their laptops in the meeting, and you want to be able to see him because he just went out of view. Well, now that they have automatic camera switching with IntelliFrame, in this video, this is actually a really, really good video, so hopefully you can hear it well.
Joni is headed into the office. Today is a big day. Just one hitch. There's construction on the bridge. She's going to have to do her presentation remotely. And this is an important one. Her manager is going to decide if Joni's project gets funded. Normally, there's a certain amount of context you miss if you're not in the room. But fortunately for
Jody jumps in and skips ahead to the backup option of their proposal. That did the trick. Jody's project is moving forward. Automatic camera switching for a teleframe brings the in-room experience to those working remote, leveling the playing field for all employees, no matter where they're working.
So this is really a big shift.
Yeah.
Think about this. How many times early on were you encouraged not to bring your device into a meeting room and turn it on? Because of the squeal, they hadn't figured out the squeal, or people weren't educated to turn off their audio. Now we've come all full circle. We're like, bring it into the meeting. You know, it'll automatically know that you're in a meeting room, and to not use audio because it'll pick up the audio in the room. But your camera can still be enabled so that it can, if you're getting blocked or camera blocked or what have you, it'll switch to your camera. So huge advances in the AI that's going in behind this. So I think this is amazing.
Yeah, and if you think about, there's the stats that are out there. So 92% of meetings have at least one remote participant. And this is going to be huge for those people. The people like, at my company, I live on the East Coast, and my company is based in the Mountain Time Zone. So I'm always remote. So they're going to be a room full of people, and maybe I need to see what one of the sales directors is saying, but he's not talking, so the camera is not picking him up. If he brings his laptop in now and he doesn't understand what I'm saying because I'm the one talking at the moment, or maybe Scott is talking or Kevin's talking, I can say, hey, Miggy, what aren't you understanding? Because now I can get those visual cues because I have his actual facial profile and his actual video stream coming to me, and it makes those 92% of meetings even that much more effective.
As a remote participant or any other participant, could you invoke a camera switch by calling somebody out by name?
So the question was, as a remote participant in the meeting, can you force the meeting to use a different camera by calling somebody out? Is that a fair recap? Yeah, that's a fair recap of the question. I've not seen, so when somebody starts talking, depending on what camera equipment you have in the room, especially if you have, say, you have a front of the room camera and the center of the room camera, so those cameras will automatically pick him up if he starts talking. So you could force the issue by asking them a question, for sure, but you're saying you can't see, in my example, you can't see Miggy anymore, and you're wanting to...
Greg's sleeping.
It's another good example I have not tested, so I don't know personally the answer, but I mean, it's a fantastic question. I will say if you call them out and they answer, though, then the cameras in the room will automatically do it.
Just to take that a step further, you could spotlight them while they're in frame, and then it wouldn't hold it. Yes?
Did the meeting organizer turn some of these cameras on? Who's turned it off?
No, they can turn it off, but they...
The question was, can the organizer turn off someone's camera? Or turn it on, sorry, turn on. No, that would be a huge security violation. But I think we all know that as an organizer, you can make a setting so that no one can turn their cameras on.
And you can
Right,
obviously
and
turn them
then
off.
you can enable it
Yeah, and you
during
can turn
the
them
meeting.
off as well.
So you can enable them to turn their cameras on, but you can't force their camera on. And then just to round this whole conversation out, you do have the right to force a mute. And I think we all know that because we've seen and done that before.
Oh yeah, I use that one a lot.
Kevin uses it on me. I don't know why. So.
All right, so switching a little bit into some of the Copilot stuff, because I told you there wasn't wasn't all Copilot, but I didn't say there wasn't any, right? So Copilot in meetings, we were kind of alluding to some of this earlier. It works best when transcription's turned on, but you can use it as long as you have the meeting set up in a way where Copilot can work without transcription. And it's what's kind of highlighted in yellow in the second bullet point. You have to enable it for only during the meeting.
Right. So what's interesting about this is they recently made this change in the admin center, in the meeting options. So I don't know how many of you have seen that. It started off transcription on, transcription off for that setting, and now it actually says only during the meeting, and then there's only after. Then after the other, I think the other set is after. So this is what I was talking about earlier about making sure if your policies are to keep transcription or not, you do have the ability to have Copilot, even if you're not allowed to keep the transcription. But again, only during the meeting.
So we said what it is, and a lot of people know what it is because it's been out there for a while, and it's talking about everywhere you see, especially the Microsoft ecosystem, it's pretty much everywhere. But what when does Copilot not work? And Scott had the idea to pull this one in. I think it was a good call out to pull the slide in here. When it will not work, in my opinion, the bottom one is the most important one. If you have enabled end-to-end encryption, Copilot's not going to work.
Right, under the Teams Premium license. Okay, so part of the Teams Premium license is you can select end-to-end encryption for a meeting, and when you do that, AI doesn't have access to the meeting because it's encrypted.
And we've gone over the first part. There was a couple of the questions that came out. The first one up there is, if you don't have it, if you're not licensed for it, you're not going to get it. But say I'm licensed for it, and Kevin at Microsoft or Scott at Microsoft, they're also licensed for it. We're going cross-tenant. So it's not going to work for them because the meeting is held in my tenant. It's an A&M meeting. So they're not going to get the advantages of Copilot because it's being held in my tenant.
And that's an excellent point, and it's something I've run into a lot in my dealings with partners. We'll be having a meeting, I'll host it, I've got Copilot, I've got access to it, and the first thing the partner says is, well, I have access to Copilot for this meeting. Who thinks yes? Who thinks no? Yeah, the no's have it. Yeah, so again, like we've said, Copilot is in the tenant of the, is in the organizer's tenant.
Yeah, organizers.
So as you work with your customers and are working on enabling Copilot or AI for them, keep that in mind, because if they're the ones that are going to want to receive the benefit of the artifacts of Copilot, they need to host a meeting. Okay, that way they can keep it. You can do it too, obviously, right? Because you'll have Copilot. Chances are you'll have Copilot, but even though you're not the organizer, you'll have the Copilot for your part of it. But they'll have, because they own the meeting, they'll have Copilot and they'll be able to take advantage of that.
A way you can kind of get around it based on, if you think about yesterday's keynote, like with Loop with guest access now. So
Did you just say bloop?
Loop.
Oh, loop. Sorry.
Loop with guest access now. So use the same example. The meeting is in my tenant, and Scott says, hey, can I get the recap for that? I can open up a Loop with guest access, and I can copy and paste the intelligent recap into Loop, and now Scott's going to have it because he's got direct access into the Loop that I just created. So there is kind of a pseudo workaround because of this. Is he going to be able to have conversation against it unless the person downloads the transcription and copies it into Loop or sends that transcription to him? Not really. He's not going to have the advantages of having a conversation against it. But if it's like I'm pulling Scott in because I need to work with client X, Y, Z, and Scott wants to add color into the sales meeting, now we can do this with Loop and Copilot and Teams.
So because this is recorded, do we need to then say, go see the kickoff, right, the keynote for CVN 2024? Oh, did I just say that out loud? Sorry.
So we've been talking about transcription, and this is what Scott was alluding to, the setting. It's during and after the meeting, only during the meeting, or during and after the meeting. So this is what he was kind of referring to with the transcription turned on, and that's basically the setting that you were looking for.
Yeah, so I don't think we could drag this one out any further. 3 slides is plenty. So.
Yeah, we've kind of hit on it a few times. All right. With transcription turned off, I mean, I think we've kind of already went over these slides a few times, so we need to go over it, but people are taking pictures on it. So
there'll be a quiz.
Yeah. Questions are great. I love the questions too. All right. All the phones are down. I like it. So here, this is going to be a video on Teams meeting, and I'm going to stop it about halfway because this is a little bit of an older video. There has been some more use cases that come out that I wish they had in this video.
Imagine you have an appointment that conflicts with your week's business review. What if you could do both? With Copilot, you can opt to follow a meeting. After the meeting ends, Copilot will summarize what you missed. You'll get a notification in Teams when the recap is ready. This recap will highlight content that was shared, summarize notes, and any action items for you or others whose names were mentioned. You see that one of your customers was discussed, and you want to learn more. You can ask Copilot clarifying questions, and it provides a detailed response. It can tell you why a certain decision was made, and gives you helpful context. You can even ask Copilot what other solutions were considered. And
So it can do all that stuff. That stuff's awesome. But some of the use cases that have come out is, what was the tone of the meeting? Was my customer happy during that meeting? Because my customer was talked about in this meeting. Or what was my sales director's how was their tone of the meeting, or what was the vibe of the meeting? And so those are some of the newer things with prompt engineering that people are starting to use that is coming out. And I wanted to make sure people were aware of that. Another one that I've found extremely helpful is, what were the pros and cons of this meeting? So that's another prompt that people are starting to use inside. I'm not saying don't have the conversation that is talking about and don't use the meeting recap, but you can take it that next step further, because we've been talking in some of the sessions I sat in and some of the other things that I've been just doing out in the industry, is use this more of the conversation, like how you would chat, how I would chat with Scott. Well, what did the customer, were they happy? Like Scott was in the meeting, but maybe Copilot was in the meeting. Did the customer seem happy in that meeting? And it can use the cues and the inflections that it's getting from the transcription. It says, overall, it seemed like this was a good tone of the meeting. So you can see that the meeting wasn't, like, there wasn't a lot of tension in the meeting. And that's good things to know, especially for ones that you couldn't be in.
Right.
Yep.
The people who are in the meeting, or the organizers of the meeting, when somebody follows it, is there any notification or invitation to those people?
Yes. Yeah, so the organizer, if you're not the, obviously if you're the organizer, you're going to be in there, but if you follow it, the organizer will get a message saying that, you know, Scott's followed this meeting, and if you need to make sure transcription's turned on, the organizer can do that at that point. But yes, they will be notified.
From the transcript, so you can see where Copilot drew these conclusions. It's a huge time saver. So that was pretty cool. But the real magic of Copilot happens during a live meeting. Let's say you're in a meeting with your team. You can ask Copilot to summarize the meeting so far. You can see how it summarizes who said what points were made, and it's really capturing the spirit of the discussion. And as the meeting progresses, you can check in on where people stand. You can even ask Copilot what questions are unresolved. It's just amazing to see this happen in real time during a meeting.
So, and they talked about yesterday during the recap about, or during the keynote, about how Copilot can actually take meeting notes, and how is that different from what it just showed and some of the other things we talked about with Intelligent Recap. So taking meeting notes versus giving me, hey, the recap of the meeting is very different. And with the meeting notes, I don't know if you guys noticed yesterday when they were going over the keynote, say Scott's in the meeting as a scribe as well. So now you have Copilot taking meeting notes live, and you can see him coming across. And Scott can say, Copilot got that wrong, because it's going to happen. And Scott can actually update it, because he is the scribe in the meeting as well. So you can actually have two people taking meeting notes, and you can see those live during the meeting. And you don't have to wait to say, hey, what did Scott say during the meeting that I need, that's, you know, kind of an action item for me.
Yeah, and so thinking back to that keynote, what I thought was very interesting about that point is the fact that it color codes. Mm-hmm. So you know where that note came from, whether it was AI generated or individually generated.
Yep, because AI is not going to understand what Scott, so Scott's going to understand, what does Chris want to come out of this meeting with? Because he understands my client. He and I have had a lot of conversations. I haven't had that conversation with Copilot, what I would need to get out of this meeting. So Scott can add very specific, the client said this, or here was the takeaway from the meeting. Not saying that Copilot or AI can't do that, but you also have to understand AI is not always correct, right? So it's one of those things, trust but verify. So this is taking that to the next step where you can trust but verify.
I just want to know how I can get the blur feature that they show here.
All right, so you guys had great questions. Is there any other questions?
Okay, time for the quiz. Excellent.
Right, yeah, well, I appreciate everybody. Hope you enjoy
Thank
the
you for
rest
your
of the
time.
conference.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of the day.